Just when fans thought the chaos had finally settled, the spotlight snapped back on one of reality TV's most complicated triangles, and this time, the tension feels heavier than ever. Jasmine is back, baby number 2 has entered the picture. And suddenly, Kirk and Rasheeda are once again pulled into a storm they never truly escaped. Fans are shocked, emotions ran high, and whispers behind the scenes suggest this reunion was anything but accidental. Sources claim Jasmine's return wasn't a quiet one. It was bold, strategic, and timed to perfection. After months of silence following the birth of her second child, she resurfaced with a glow-up, a message, and what many believe is a hidden agenda. Was this about closure? Or was this about reopening wounds that never healed? The moment her name started trending again, insiders say Kirk froze, because some secrets don't stay buried forever. Meanwhile, Rasheeda wasn't prepared for the emotional whiplash. Friends close to her say she felt blindsided, not just by Jasmine's return, but by Kirk's reaction to it. Cameras weren't rolling yet, but tensions were already boiling behind closed doors. Accusations flew, old arguments resurfaced, and one late-night phone call reportedly sent the entire household into chaos. Fans are already taking sides, digging through timelines, screenshots, and cryptic social media posts that seem to tell a story nobody wants to say out loud. Is Jasmine hinting at more than just co-parenting? Is Kirk caught between his past and his present once again? And how far will Rasheeda go to protect her marriage and her peace? Because this time, it's not just about drama. It's about loyalty, legacy, and a family left divided. And if the rumors are true, what's coming next could change everything you thought you knew. Eyes. The moment Jasmine stepped back into the public eye, everything shifted. It wasn't loud at first. No press run, no interview, just one photo. Jasmine standing in soft light, baby carrier on her chest, captioned with a single sentence that fans immediately dissected. "Growth looks good on me." Within minutes, blogs picked it up, fans were shocked, and the comments turned into a battlefield. Some praised her strength, others accused her of stirring the pot. But everyone noticed one thing. Kirk liked the post, and he unliked it less than 10 minutes later. By then, it was too late. Inside Kirk and Rasheeda's world, emotions ran high. Sources close to the family say Rasheeda saw the notification pop up on Kirk's phone before he could even explain. She didn't scream, she didn't cry, she just stared at him in silence, the kind that makes a room feel smaller. Kirk tried to brush it off, saying it was nothing, just support for a mother of his child. But Rasheeda had heard that line before. And this time, it hit different. Behind the scenes, Jasmine wasn't just posting pictures. She was making moves, quiet ones, calls to mutual friends, messages to people who once swore loyalty to Rasheeda. She wasn't asking for favors. She was reminding them of history. Reminding them of nights they all remembered but never talked about publicly. One friend later claimed Jasmine said, "I'm not here to destroy anything. I'm here to stop pretending." That sentence alone sent chills through everyone who heard it. Kirk, meanwhile, found himself unraveling. The birth of baby number 2 had already shaken him more than he admitted. Not because he didn't love his child, but because it forced him to face a version of himself he kept locking away. He told one close associate that seeing Jasmine again, glowing and unbothered, made him question whether he had really moved forward or just learned how to hide better. Those words never made it to Rasheeda's ears. At least not directly. Rasheeda felt the shift before she had proof. Kirk became quieter, distracted, his phone never left his side. Late night, business calls, started creeping back into the routine. When she finally confronted him, emotions ran high and the argument escalated fast. Rasheeda demanded honesty, Kirk demanded patience. Neither got what they wanted. Doors slammed, voices echoed, and by the end of the night, the family was left divided in a way they hadn't been in years. Outside the house, fans were already spinning theories. Screenshots of Jasmine's old interviews resurfaced. Clips of Kirk denying involvement years ago started trending again. Comments flooded in saying things like, "This story was never finished," and "Rasheeda deserves better." Others blamed Jasmine, accusing her of using the baby as leverage. Jasmine didn't respond. She let the noise build. Because according to people close to her, silence was part of the plan. Then came the message. Not public, not leaked. A direct message from Jasmine to Kirk that reportedly read, "We need to talk." For real this time. Kirk saw it late at night, long after Rasheeda had gone to bed. He didn't reply right away. He stared at the screen for nearly an hour. Because replying meant reopening a chapter he promised was closed. But ignoring it meant risking something else entirely. The next morning, Kirk left the house earlier than usual. Rasheeda noticed. She always noticed. She didn't ask questions. She made calls instead. One to her closest friend. Another to a family member who had warned her years ago that unresolved drama always comes back louder. By the time Kirk walked into what he claimed was a meeting, Jasmine was already there. Baby with a sitter. Calm. Prepared. And not alone. A mutual acquaintance sat nearby, someone who knew both sides and who would later say the tension in that room was unbearable. Jasmine didn't yell, she didn't accuse, she laid everything out slowly. The missed calls, the financial disagreements, the promises that were made privately but never honored publicly. She talked about motherhood, about feeling erased, about watching Kirk build a perfect image while she carried the consequences. Kirk tried to interrupt. She shut it down with one sentence. You don't get to control the narrative anymore. Emotions ran high, and for the first time, Kirk realized Jasmine wasn't asking for attention. She was demanding accountability. What Kirk didn't know was that Rasheeda was already getting pieces of the story from someone else. A text came through mid-conversation. Vague but dangerous. You might want to ask where Kirk really is. Rasheeda's hands shook as she read it. Not because she didn't expect drama, but because she felt it in her chest. That familiar warning feeling she hated. The one that told her something was about to break. Back at the meeting, Jasmine dropped the bomb. She hinted that there were things she'd kept private out of respect, but respect had limits. She didn't threaten. She didn't need to. Kirk understood. If Jasmine spoke openly, the fallout wouldn't just hit him. It would hit Rasheeda, the kids, the brand, everything. He left that meeting shaken, promising to figure something out. Jasmine watched him go, not satisfied but ready. That night, Kirk came home late. Too late. Rasheeda was waiting. No cameras, no audience, just raw emotion. She asked one question. Are you choosing honesty or are you choosing comfort? Kirk didn't answer fast enough. And in that pause, Rasheeda felt the ground shift beneath her feet. The family was left divided, the past was officially back in the present, and somewhere in the middle of it all, Jasmine was preparing for her next move, knowing this was only the beginning. The silence after that night was louder than any argument. Rasheeda didn't cry. She didn't throw accusations. She did something Kirk feared more than yelling. She pulled back. The next morning, she moved through the house on autopilot, polite but distant, like someone already preparing for life after disappointment. Kirk noticed it immediately. Her tone was calm, but her eyes were cold. And that scared him. Jasmine, on the other hand, was moving in the opposite direction. She became visible, not reckless but intentional. Another post appeared, this time not of the baby, but of her sitting in a studio chair, headphones around her neck, captioned, "Telling my story soon." Fans were shocked. Blogs exploded. Speculation ran wild. Was it an interview? A podcast? A sit-down tell-all? No one knew, but everyone felt the pressure rising. Friends and family were pulled into the drama whether they wanted to be or not. Rasheeda's inner circle urged her to stay quiet, to protect her peace, to let Kirk handle the mess he created. But peace felt impossible when her phone buzzed nonstop with messages asking if she was okay, if the rumors were true, if Jasmine was about to expose everything. Every message felt like a reminder that her marriage was once again public property. Kirk tried damage control. Calls were made. Favors were requested. He reached out to Jasmine again, asking her to slow down, to think about the kids, to think about the consequences. Jasmine listened, then calmly replied, "I've been thinking about consequences for years." "It's your turn." Emotions ran high, and Kirk realized he was no longer in control of the situation. Then came the leak. Not a full story, just a whisper. A clip surfaced online, audio only, allegedly Jasmine speaking about feeling silenced, and used as a secret. The clip didn't name names, but it didn't need to. Fans connected the dots instantly. The comments were brutal. Some defended Rasheeda fiercely, saying she was the real victim. Others claimed Jasmine had been wronged and deserved her moment. The family was left divided, not just privately, but publicly. Rasheeda finally broke her silence, but not in the way anyone expected. She posted a simple quote. "Truth doesn't rush. It waits." That single sentence sent shockwaves through the fanbase. Was it a warning? A declaration? Kirk saw it and knew things were slipping further out of his hands. Behind closed doors, Rasheeda confronted Kirk again. This time, there was no yelling. Just facts, timelines, questions he couldn't dodge. She asked him why Jasmine felt comfortable enough to resurface now. Why this felt planned. Why he seemed more scared of Jasmine talking than of losing his marriage. Kirk tried to explain, but explanations felt thin. Excuses felt familiar. And familiarity had become exhausting. Meanwhile, Jasmine's confidence only grew. Sources say she felt empowered, finally seen. She began meeting with people, discussing opportunities, hinting at projects that would put her voice front and center. She wasn't hiding anymore, and that terrified everyone involved. Then, another twist. A mutual friend revealed to Rasheeda that Jasmine wasn't acting alone. Someone close to Kirk had been feeding her information for months. Schedules, moods, weak spots. Rasheeda's heart sank. Betrayal layered on betrayal. She confronted Kirk with the information. He denied it at first, then went quiet. That silence confirmed everything. Rasheeda felt something snap. Not anger. Clarity. She told Kirk she needed space. Real space. Not a break. Not a pause. space to think without his influence. Kirk resisted, panicked, pleaded. But Rasheeda had made up her mind. For the first time, she chose herself without hesitation. As Rasheeda stepped back, Jasmine stepped forward again. This time, she spoke publicly. Not naming names, but telling a story of motherhood, abandonment, and reclaiming power. Emotions ran high as fans dissected every word. Some praised her bravery, others accused her of rewriting history. But the damage was done. Kirk watched everything unfold from the sidelines, realizing too late that his attempts to control the narrative had only fueled the fire. His family was fractured, his reputation was shaky, and the two women whose lives he'd entangled were no longer playing by his rules. And just when everyone thought the storm had peaked, a new rumor surfaced. One that suggested Jasmine wasn't done revealing truths. That there was one final detail she'd kept hidden. Something that could change how everyone saw the past. As whispers grew louder, one thing became clear. This wasn't just drama resurfacing. It was a reckoning. The rumor didn't stay a rumor for long. Within 48 hours, blogs were reporting that Jasmine had scheduled a private sit-down with producers. Not to attack, not to scream, but to set the record straight. That phrase alone sent shockwaves. Fans were shocked because everyone knew what set the record straight usually meant in this world. Receipts, timelines, names left unspoken but heavily implied. Emotions ran high across social media as people debated whether this was empowerment or revenge. Rasheeda tried to stay offline, but the noise followed her everywhere. Even simple errands turned into moments of tension when strangers whispered or stared too long. Friends said she looked composed, but tired, like someone carrying a weight she didn't ask for. Privately, she wrestled with conflicting emotions. Loyalty to her marriage, anger at Kirk, empathy she didn't want to feel for Jasmine, and above all, fear of what the truth might expose. Kirk was unraveling. Sleep became optional. His phone rang non-stop. Business partners wanted reassurance. Family members demanded explanations. He felt trapped between damage control and denial. He reached out to Jasmine again, this time not with warnings but with desperation. He asked her what she really wanted. Jasmine's response was simple: "I want peace. But peace needs truth." That sentence haunted him. Behind Jasmine's calm exterior, there was fire. Years of being reduced to a footnote had hardened her resolve. She confided in a close friend that this wasn't about Kirk anymore. It was about her children growing up knowing she didn't stay silent. Knowing she chose her voice over comfort. That mindset shifted everything. Then came the unexpected twist. A former insider stepped forward anonymously, claiming to have witnessed private conversations years ago that contradicted Kirk's public statements. Nothing was proven, but the implication was enough. Fans dissected every word, every hint. The family was left divided even further as extended relatives began choosing sides quietly. Rasheeda finally confronted the possibility she had avoided. What if Jasmine wasn't lying? What if parts of the story she accepted years ago were incomplete? The thought shook her, not because it excused betrayal, but because it reframed it. She found herself questioning moments she once brushed off. Late nights, vague explanations, promises that never fully landed. When Kirk sensed Rasheeda pulling further away emotionally, panic set in. He tried grand gestures, apologies, reassurances, but Rasheeda wasn't moved. She told him she needed honesty without spin. No protecting images, no half-truths. Kirk tried, but every answer felt rehearsed. And Rasheeda felt her trust eroding in real time. Meanwhile, Jasmine's sit-down date leaked. Anticipation skyrocketed. Fans counted down like it was a season finale. Some accused her of chasing clout. Others said she'd earned the right to speak. Jasmine remained quiet, letting speculation do the work for her. Days before the interview, Jasmine reached out to Rasheeda directly. Not through intermediaries. A direct message. Respectful. Cautious. She didn't accuse. She didn't demand. She simply said she never wanted to hurt her and understood if Rasheeda hated her. Rasheeda stared at the message for a long time before replying. She said she didn't hate Jasmine. She hated lies. That exchange changed something for both of them. Kirk found out about the conversation and felt blindsided. For the first time, he realized the narrative might move forward without him at the center. The women he thought he could manage were communicating without his input. That realization stripped him of the last illusion of control. The sit-down finally happened. No shouting, no theatrics. Jasmine spoke slowly, carefully. She talked about timing, about being asked to stay quiet, about protecting others while sacrificing herself. She never said Rasheeda's name, but she spoke about respect and misunderstanding. Emotions ran high as viewers read between the lines. Rasheeda watched the interview alone. No Kirk, no friends, just her thoughts. She didn't feel rage. She felt clarity mixed with grief. Grief for what could have been different. Grief for trust that might never fully return. After the interview aired, Kirk issued a vague statement about growth and accountability. Fans weren't buying it. The comments were relentless. The family was left divided in public opinion like never before. And just when it seemed the story had reached its peak, another revelation loomed. A detail Jasmine hinted at off-camera. Something she said she might share one day, but not yet. Something that could either bring closure or reopen everything. As the dust settled, one truth was undeniable. Nothing would ever go back to the way it was. The aftermath hit harder than anyone expected. The interview didn't just stir conversation, it shifted alliances. People who had stayed neutral for years suddenly felt bold enough to speak. Old friends resurfaced with selective memories. Distant relatives hinted at things they always suspected. Emotions ran high as the story grew beyond Jasmine, Kirk, and Rasheeda and turned into a full-blown reckoning of past behavior. Rasheeda became quieter than ever. Not withdrawn, but intentional. She stopped explaining herself, stopped correcting rumors. She focused on her kids, her work, her routine. But inside, she was processing a truth that hurt more than betrayal. She realized she had spent years protecting a version of reality that may never have fully existed. And that realization felt heavier than anger. Kirk tried to regain footing by leaning into public humility. He spoke about therapy, about growth, about accountability, but the words felt late. Fans were shocked at how disconnected he seemed from the emotional gravity of the situation. Every time he spoke, it felt like he was addressing an audience instead of the people he hurt. That disconnect only deepened the divide. Jasmine watched the reaction unfold with mixed emotions. There was relief in being heard, but also exhaustion. She hadn't anticipated how draining visibility could be. Still, she stood firm. When asked privately if she regretted speaking up, she reportedly said no. She said silence had cost her too much already. Then came another twist. A resurfaced text exchange began circulating online, allegedly between Kirk and a third party, discussing how to manage the situation years earlier. Nothing was confirmed, but the implication alone reignited outrage. Fans accused Kirk of manipulation. Others questioned why it took so long for these details to surface. The family was left divided again, this time over credibility. Rasheeda saw the texts and felt something close. Not her heart, but a chapter. She realized she didn't need every detail to make a decision. She needed peace. And peace didn't require proof, just acceptance. She told Kirk she was done trying to reconcile versions of the truth. She told him she needed distance not as punishment but as protection. Kirk reacted badly. Anger replaced remorse. He accused Jasmine of poisoning everything. Accused Rasheeda of giving up too easily. That outburst sealed something irreversible. Rasheeda saw it clearly now. When control slipped, so did accountability. Jasmine stayed out of it publicly, but privately she felt the weight of unintended consequences. She never wanted to be the catalyst for a breakdown. She wanted acknowledgement. Still, she refused to take responsibility for Kirk's choices. She said, "Truth doesn't destroy. Lies do," and she meant it. Fans continued to debate endlessly. Some rooted for Rasheeda to walk away for good. Others hoped for reconciliation. Many demanded Jasmine reveal the final detail she had teased. But Jasmine held back. She said some truths needed time. That timing mattered. As weeks passed, the intensity shifted into something colder. Acceptance. The family was left divided, but no longer exploding. Just fractured. Rasheeda focused on rebuilding herself quietly. Kirk faced consequences he couldn't talk his way out of. Jasmine stepped into a new chapter, no longer hidden, but still guarded. And in the silence that followed, one thing became clear to everyone watching. This wasn't just about scandal. It was about power, voice, and the cost of avoiding truth for too long. The drama may have fueled headlines, but underneath it all was a lesson none of them could escape. Some stories don't end when you want them to. They end when the truth decides it's time. The quiet didn't last. It never does. Just when the narrative seemed to settle into an uneasy calm, another shift rippled through the story. Not explosive, not loud, but calculated. Jasmine reappeared, not online this time, but in rooms that mattered. Industry rooms. Conversations that shaped perception. She wasn't chasing attention anymore. Attention was finding her. People began to notice that opportunities were opening for her. Panels. Collaborations. Invitations to speak about motherhood and reclaiming identity. Fans were shocked by how quickly the tone changed. The same voices that once dismissed her were now calling her resilient, articulate, powerful. Emotions ran high as people questioned whether this rise was overdue or opportunistic. Jasmine didn't explain herself. She let the work speak. Rasheeda watched from a distance, conflicted in ways she struggled to name. There was admiration she didn't want to admit, and pain she hadn't fully released. Seeing Jasmine step into the light forced Rasheeda to confront something uncomfortable. The system that protected Kirk for so long had failed both of them in different ways. That realization softened her anger but sharpened her resolve. Kirk, meanwhile, felt himself slipping further into isolation. The calls slowed, the support thinned. People who once defended him publicly now chose silence. He told himself it was temporary. That public opinion always swings back. But privately, he knew something fundamental had changed. This wasn't about one scandal. It was about a pattern catching up with him. In a last attempt to regain footing, Kirk requested a private conversation with Rasheeda. No cameras, no friends, just them. She agreed, but on her terms. Neutral space, limited time. When they sat across from each other, the air was heavy with everything unsaid. Kirk apologized again, but this time Rasheeda stopped him mid-sentence. She said she didn't need apologies anymore. She needed accountability without conditions. Kirk struggled with that. Accountability meant accepting that some damage couldn't be undone. The conversation ended without resolution. Not dramatic, just final. Rasheeda walked away knowing she had chosen clarity over chaos. The family was left divided, but for the first time, she felt steady. Jasmine heard about the meeting later and felt an unexpected wave of emotion. Not satisfaction, not guilt, something closer to closure. She realized that her truth had shifted the balance, even if it didn't heal everything. She shared with a friend that speaking up had freed her, but it hadn't erased the past. It had simply allowed her to stop carrying it alone. Fans continued to speculate about the unrevealed detail. Theories grew wilder by the day. Some claimed it involved finances. Others suggested timelines that contradicted everything known publicly. Jasmine refused to confirm or deny anything. She said mystery wasn't power. Choice was. And she chose restraint. Weeks turned into months. The story slowly evolved from scandal to aftermath. Kirk focused on repairing what he could. Rasheeda focused on herself and her children. Jasmine focused on building something new. The drama no longer lived in daily headlines, but its impact lingered. Then, quietly, Jasmine made a final statement. Not explosive, not accusatory. She said she was closing that chapter publicly. That she had said what she needed to say. Emotions ran high among fans who felt deprived of a final reveal. But Jasmine stood firm. She said healing didn't require full disclosure. Sometimes it required boundaries. That decision changed the tone of everything. Without constant escalation, the story lost its edge. But what remained was deeper. A lesson about silence, power, and the cost of delay. The family was left divided, but no longer bleeding. And as the spotlight dimmed, one truth settled in for everyone watching. Drama may draw attention, but growth reshapes lives. Jasmine had reclaimed her voice. Rasheeda had reclaimed her peace. Kirk was left to confront himself without distraction. And while the story began with scandal, it ended with something rarer in this world. Consequence. Time passed, but the tension never fully disappeared. It just transformed. What once felt like chaos became something quieter, heavier. The kind of aftermath that lingers in glances, in pauses, in things no longer said. Rasheeda settled into a new rhythm, one built on control and distance. She wasn't performing strength anymore. She was living it. Fans noticed the change immediately. Her presence felt firmer, more deliberate, like someone who had stopped asking for permission to exist in her own truth. Kirk struggled with that shift more than he admitted. He had grown used to Rasheeda being the anchor, the fixer, the one who absorbed storms and kept moving. Now, she wasn't absorbing anything. She set boundaries. She limited conversations. She no longer softened her words to protect his feelings. Emotions ran high every time they interacted, even in the smallest exchanges. Kirk realized too late that what he missed wasn't just the marriage. It was the safety of being shielded from consequences. Jasmine's life continued moving forward, but not without resistance. For every opportunity she gained, there were whispers questioning her motives. Critics accused her of rewriting the past, of benefiting from chaos. She heard it all, but this time, she didn't internalize it. She had learned that being misunderstood was sometimes the price of being honest. That lesson gave her an unshakable calm. Then, unexpectedly, Jasmine crossed paths with someone from Kirk's circle at an event. The interaction was brief but tense. Later that night, messages began circulating claiming Jasmine had smirked when Kirk's name was mentioned. Fans were shocked by how quickly narratives were twisted. Jasmine addressed it subtly the next day, saying, "People project their guilt onto silence." That single line reignited debates all over again. Rasheeda watched the drama resurface and felt something different this time. Detachment. She no longer felt responsible for correcting misinformation or defending anyone. She had stepped out of the triangle emotionally, even if the world hadn't caught up yet. The family was left divided, but Rasheeda no longer felt divided within herself. Kirk reached a breaking point when a longtime associate confronted him privately. No cameras, no audience, just honesty. He was told that the problem wasn't Jasmine speaking up or Rasheeda pulling away. The problem was years of avoiding accountability until it became unavoidable. That conversation shook him more than public backlash ever did, because it stripped away excuses. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Kirk admitted he didn't know how to fix what he'd broken. And for the first time, no one rushed to reassure him. That silence forced him to sit with himself, to reflect without distraction, to understand that growth without acknowledgement was just another performance. Jasmine felt the ripple of that shift even without direct contact. Mutual acquaintances mentioned Kirk seemed quieter, less defensive. She didn't feel triumph, she felt relief, not because he was struggling, but because the burden of being the problem was no longer placed on her shoulders alone. Fans continued to speculate about a reunion, a confrontation, a final sit-down between Jasmine and Rasheeda. But that moment never came. And maybe that was the point. Both women had reached a place where closure didn't require face-to-face reconciliation. It required internal peace. Rasheeda focused on rebuilding trust with herself. She explored new creative paths. She surrounded herself with people who didn't need her to be strong all the time. Fans praised her glow, but those close to her knew it wasn't about appearance. It was about release. As months passed, the story stopped being about scandal and started being about aftermath. About how people live after the truth is spoken. Kirk lived quieter, more contained. Jasmine lived freer, more intentional. Rasheeda lived steadier, more grounded. The family was left divided, but each person stood on clearer ground. And in the end, what lingered wasn't the shock or the drama. It was the lesson. Silence protects comfort, truth disrupts it, and once truth is spoken, there is no going back. Only forward, changed forever. Even with all that time passing, the story refused to fully fade. It lived on in side comments, in reactions that lingered a second too long, in interviews where names weren't said but meanings were clear. Fans were shocked at how often the past still crept into the present, proving that unresolved history never really disappears. It just waits. Rasheeda reached a point where people around her noticed a shift from healing to rebuilding. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was redefining what stability looked like on her own terms. She stopped responding to indirects, stopped reacting to speculation. When asked privately how she felt about Jasmine's continued visibility, Rasheeda said something that surprised everyone. She said, "I don't need her silence to have peace." Emotions ran high among those who heard it, because it marked the first time she publicly released the comparison. Jasmine, meanwhile, was navigating a different challenge. Success came with scrutiny. Every move was analyzed, every word weighed. She felt pressure to remain perfect, composed, grateful. But perfection wasn't her goal anymore. Authenticity was. She admitted to a close circle that the hardest part of speaking her truth wasn't the backlash. It was the expectation that she now had to be unbreakable. Kirk continued his quiet transformation, though many questioned its sincerity. He attended fewer events, spoke less publicly. When he did speak, his words were measured, careful. Some fans believed he was finally learning. Others felt it was too little, too late. The family was left divided not just emotionally, but ideologically. Forgiveness versus accountability, growth versus consequence. Then came another unexpected ripple. A mutual friend revealed that Kirk had started therapy seriously, not as a talking point, but as a commitment. No public announcement, no validation, just work. When that information surfaced quietly, reactions were mixed. Some praised the effort, others said it should have happened years ago. Emotions ran high again, proving that healing doesn't always bring relief. Sometimes it brings debate. Jasmine heard about Kirk's efforts and felt conflicted. She didn't feel obligated to respond, and she didn't. Her silence wasn't dismissal, it was boundary. She had learned that she didn't need to participate in every chapter of someone else's growth. That lesson felt powerful. Rasheeda noticed the shift too, but she didn't rush to reconnect. She understood now that change didn't require reunion. It required consistency. She focused on creating an environment for her children where honesty wasn't hidden behind image, where strength wasn't confused with endurance. Fans admired that shift, even if they didn't fully understand it. As time went on, the public conversation softened. Outrage gave way to reflection. People began discussing patterns instead of personalities, power dynamics instead of headlines. The story became less about who was right and more about what happens when truth is delayed. The family was left divided, but the audience was learning. Jasmine eventually addressed her supporters directly, thanking them for listening but reminding them that her story wasn't entertainment. She said it was her life. That sentence stopped many in their tracks. Fans were shocked by how easily drama can blur into humanity. Rasheeda shared a similar sentiment in a separate moment, saying that sometimes the strongest thing a woman can do is stop explaining her pain. That quote resonated deeply, especially with those who had followed her journey for years. Kirk remained mostly quiet, and in that quiet, reality settled. He wasn't the center anymore. And that, more than anything, marked the true shift. The narrative no longer revolved around protecting him or attacking him. It moved forward without him at the center. In the end, there was no dramatic reunion, no explosive confrontation, no final reveal. And maybe that was the most realistic outcome of all. Life didn't tie things up neatly. It left loose ends, unanswered questions, space. The story that began with scandal evolved into something deeper. A reminder that truth doesn't always arrive with closure. Sometimes it arrives with change, with discomfort, with growth that doesn't look pretty. And as the spotlight finally dimmed, what remained wasn't a villain or a hero. It was three people changed by the same truth in different ways. Jasmine with her voice reclaimed. Rasheeda with her peace protected. Kirk with consequences he could no longer outrun. The family was left divided, but honesty had finally entered the room. And once it does, nothing stays the same. Even after everything, the echo of the situation still followed them. Not loudly, not aggressively, but persistently. It showed up in unexpected moments. A question during an interview that paused a second too long. A comment section that refused to move on. A song lyric that suddenly felt personal. Fans were shocked by how a story that had seemingly settled still carried so much emotional weight. Rasheeda learned how to live with that echo without letting it define her. She became more selective with her energy. She laughed more freely with people who felt safe. She stopped over-explaining decisions that were made for her own sanity. Those close to her noticed she no longer flinched when Kirk's name came up. Not because it didn't matter, but because it no longer controlled her emotional temperature. That was growth. Kirk, on the other hand, was forced to sit with the long tail of consequence. Not the loud backlash, but the quiet loss of trust. Doors didn't open as easily. Conversations felt guarded. Even when people were polite, there was distance. He began to understand that reputation doesn't shatter in one moment. It erodes slowly, after patterns become undeniable. Emotions ran high internally as he faced the reality that rebuilding would take longer than he ever imagined. Jasmine continued carving out a life that no longer revolved around reaction. She focused on motherhood, on stability, on creating a future that didn't require validation from the past. Still, she wasn't immune to reflection. Late at night, she sometimes revisited old memories, wondering if things could have unfolded differently. But regret didn't live there anymore. Acceptance did. Then, quietly, something unexpected happened. Jasmine declined a major opportunity that would have brought the drama back into full spotlight. Producers wanted conflict. They wanted confrontation. They wanted a reunion moment that would trend. Jasmine said no. Fans were shocked. Many expected her to capitalize on the moment. Instead, she chose restraint. She said she wasn't interested in reopening wounds for entertainment. That decision shifted public perception again. Suddenly, the narrative that painted her as attention-seeking lost traction. People began to see intention instead of impulse. The family was left divided in opinion once more, but the conversation had matured. Rasheeda heard about Jasmine turning down the opportunity and felt a complicated mix of relief and respect. It didn't erase the past, but it confirmed something important. Not every boundary was performative. Some were real. That realization helped Rasheeda release lingering resentment she hadn't fully acknowledged. Kirk heard about it too, and it stirred something uncomfortable. A recognition that the chaos he feared wasn't being fueled by Jasmine anymore. It existed because of unresolved history. That truth was harder to confront than any public accusation. Time kept moving, as it always does. The intensity of the situation faded into something more reflective. Fans who once argued endlessly began sharing their own stories in comment sections. Stories about betrayal, about silence, about choosing peace. The drama had transformed into something strangely communal. Emotions ran high, but in a different way. Rasheeda leaned into that transformation. She used her platform to talk about boundaries without naming names. About choosing clarity over comfort. About letting go without bitterness. People listened, not because of scandal, but because of sincerity. Jasmine did the same in her own way, speaking about reclaiming identity after being reduced to a narrative. She emphasized that healing wasn't linear and that speaking up didn't automatically bring peace. It brought responsibility. That honesty resonated deeply. Kirk remained mostly out of the spotlight, and that absence became part of the story. Some saw it as avoidance. Others saw it as humility. The truth likely lived somewhere in between. Growth is rarely clean. Accountability is rarely comfortable. As years layered over the situation, what remained wasn't the shock value. It was the shift. Three people had been changed by the same truth, but each carried it differently. The family was left divided in structure, but no longer in denial. And in quiet moments, away from commentary and cameras, life continued. Kids grew, routines evolved, laughter returned in unexpected places. Not because everything was fixed, but because people adapt. The story that once felt explosive became reflective. A cautionary tale about silence. A reminder about voice. A lesson about timing. Fans were shocked not by new drama, but by how much had changed since the beginning. In the end, there was no final twist, no dramatic bow to wrap it all up. Just movement. Forward. Imperfect. Honest. Jasmine moved on with her voice intact. Rasheeda moved forward with her peace protected. Kirk moved ahead carrying the weight of lessons learned too late. The family was left divided, yes. But they were also left changed. And sometimes, change is the only real ending there is. The distance between them eventually became normal. Not comfortable, not friendly, just accepted. That acceptance was its own kind of ending. Rasheeda stopped waiting for moments of clarity from Kirk and started creating them for herself. She changed routines, restructured priorities, and learned how to sit in silence without filling it with hope. Fans noticed she no longer spoke in circles. When she did speak, it was direct, grounded, and final. Kirk felt that shift deeply. Not because of public reaction, but because of private absence. The kind that doesn't announce itself. He missed being consulted, missed being central, missed being forgiven before he fully understood what he had done. Emotions ran high during moments when he realized forgiveness wasn't guaranteed just because time passed. Accountability demanded more than patience. It demanded change without applause. Jasmine continued living a life that no longer asked for permission. She protected her peace fiercely, especially when old narratives tried to resurface. There were moments when she was tempted to correct misinformation, to defend herself again, but she resisted. She understood now that not every lie needed her truth to exist. Some things collapse under their own weight. Then came an unexpected interaction. A shared space. A brief encounter where Jasmine and Rasheeda crossed paths unexpectedly. No cameras. No audience. Just a few seconds of eye contact. The tension was real, but so was the restraint. They didn't speak. They didn't avoid each other either. They nodded. That was it. Fans would later speculate endlessly when word leaked, but those seconds meant more than any public exchange ever could. It wasn't reconciliation. It was recognition. Rasheeda walked away from that moment feeling lighter. Not because wounds had healed, but because they no longer defined her reactions. She realized she didn't need closure from Jasmine or Kirk. She had given it to herself by choosing clarity over confusion. Jasmine felt something similar. Not relief, not triumph, but peace. She had feared that encounter more than she admitted. Feared old emotions resurfacing. Instead, she felt grounded. She had moved on in ways she didn't need to announce. Kirk never heard about the encounter until much later. When he did, it hit him harder than any headline. He realized that the two women he once positioned against each other had found a way to exist without him at the center. That realization forced a level of humility he had avoided for years. Time continued doing what it does best. Creating distance and perspective. The story that once felt all-consuming became a reference point instead of a wound. Fans still talked, but with less venom. More reflection. Emotions ran high when people revisited early moments and recognized patterns they hadn't seen before. Rasheeda leaned into mentorship, quietly supporting others navigating betrayal and reinvention. She didn't tell her story directly. She didn't need to. Her presence carried it. Strength without spectacle. Resilience without noise. Jasmine focused on building stability for her children, ensuring they grew up knowing their mother chose honesty even when it was uncomfortable. She refused to let her past define their future. That commitment guided every decision she made. Kirk continued his journey away from spotlight and toward self-examination. Progress was uneven. Setbacks happened, but he no longer blamed others for his discomfort. That alone marked a shift, even if it didn't repair everything. And so the story reached its quiet conclusion. Not wrapped in a bow. Not resolved for everyone, but settled enough to allow forward movement. The family was left divided, yes, but no longer fractured by denial. Truth had done its work. Not cleanly, not gently, but completely. In the end, what lingered wasn't scandal. It was transformation. 3 lives altered by one truth spoken too late but still in time to matter. Jasmine with her voice intact. Rasheeda with her boundaries firm. Kirk with lessons learned the hard way. And for those watching, the drama became something else entirely. A reminder that silence always has a cost. That truth always finds a way out. And that once it does, the only choice left is how you live after it. As the years stretched forward, the drama settled into memory, but memory has a way of resurfacing when least expected. A documentary rumor sparked renewed chatter, not because anyone confirmed it, but because people realized the story had become bigger than the people in it. Fans were shocked by how invested they still felt, how the emotions came rushing back as if no time had passed at all. Rasheeda handled the renewed attention with grace. She declined interviews that framed her as a victim and redirected conversations toward growth and ownership. She made it clear she wasn't interested in reliving pain for clicks. That firmness became her signature. People began to see her not just as someone who endured betrayal, but as someone who transformed it into boundaries and leadership. Kirk watched from afar, aware that every new wave of discussion reopened questions he had learned to live with but not fully answer. He felt the weight of being a lesson in someone else's story. That realization humbled him. He stopped trying to correct narratives and focused instead on living differently, even when no one was watching. Emotions ran high privately as he grappled with regret that couldn't be undone. Jasmine continued evolving quietly. She expanded her work behind the scenes, supporting others navigating public scrutiny. She rarely spoke about the past unless asked directly, and even then, she kept it measured. She understood now that peace wasn't the absence of conflict, but the presence of self-respect. Then came a moment that surprised everyone. A public event honoring women's resilience invited both Rasheeda and Jasmine separately. Organizers hadn't anticipated the reaction when both accepted. Fans speculated wildly about a confrontation. Cameras waited, tension buzzed, but when the night came, nothing explosive happened. They were professional, composed, respectful. That restraint spoke louder than any argument ever could. The image of them existing in the same space without chaos shifted something in the collective consciousness. The family was left divided still, but the narrative had matured. It was no longer about triangles and blame. It was about consequences and choices. After the event, Jasmine reflected on how far she'd come. She realized that once, she would have felt the need to prove something. Now, she felt nothing but calm. Rasheeda felt the same. Two women shaped by the same storm, standing on different shores, finally at peace with where they landed. Kirk saw the photos later and felt a mix of pride and sorrow. Pride that growth had occurred without destruction. Sorrow that he had been the catalyst for so much pain. That duality stayed with him, a reminder that lessons often arrive wrapped in loss. Time continued to soften the edges. The story became one of reference rather than reaction. People cited it when discussing accountability, silence, and power. It lived on not as gossip but as example. Emotions ran high less often, replaced by understanding. In quiet moments, Rasheeda felt gratitude for choosing herself. Jasmine felt gratitude for choosing truth. Kirk felt gratitude for choosing reflection, even if late. The family was left divided, but no longer broken by denial. And so the story found its real ending. Not in headlines, not in arguments, not in final reveals. But in lived change. In people moving forward differently because they had to. Because they learned. What began as scandal ended as transformation. And that, more than any drama, was the lasting impact. Even when the story seemed finished, it kept breathing on its own. Not because anyone pushed it, but because unresolved truths have a way of living longer than the moment they're revealed. People still referenced it in conversations about loyalty and silence, about what happens when image is protected more fiercely than honesty. Fans were shocked by how often the situation became a mirror for their own lives. Rasheeda continued walking forward with intention. She no longer measured progress by how far she'd come from Kirk, but by how close she stayed to herself. She trusted her instincts again. That was the real win. She stopped apologizing for choosing distance. When people asked if she believed in forgiveness, she said forgiveness didn't require proximity. That line resonated deeply. Kirk lived with a different reality. Accountability followed him quietly, not loudly enough to trend, but consistently enough to matter. He learned that rebuilding trust wasn't a project with an end date. It was daily behavior. Unseen, uncelebrated. Some days he did better than others. Some days the weight of regret pressed harder than progress. Emotions ran high in private moments when he realized growth didn't guarantee redemption. Jasmine remained steady in her evolution. She refused to let the past define her narrative, but she didn't deny it either. She spoke about resilience without glamorizing pain. About truth without weaponizing it. She had learned that survival didn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looked like calm mornings and protected boundaries. Then, quietly, Jasmine made a choice that surprised many. She stepped away from public commentary altogether for a while. No statements, no interviews, no indirects. Fans were shocked, assuming silence meant retreat. But those close to her knew it meant peace. She had said what she needed to say. The rest belonged to time. Rasheeda noticed the quiet and felt something unexpected. Relief. Not because the story disappeared, but because it no longer demanded her attention. She had reclaimed her narrative without having to explain it to anyone. The family was left divided, but she no longer felt pulled in opposite directions. Kirk also felt the quiet, though it landed differently. Without constant noise, there was nothing to hide behind. Reflection became unavoidable. He began recognizing patterns in himself that extended beyond this one situation. Avoidance, control, fear of losing image. Acknowledging those patterns was uncomfortable but necessary. As the years layered on, the story transformed fully. It became less about individuals and more about lessons. People talked about it in terms of boundaries and voice. About how silence can be complicit. About how truth, once spoken, changes the terrain forever. Rasheeda embodied that lesson without preaching it. Jasmine embodied it without demanding validation. Kirk embodied it through consequence. 3 different outcomes shaped by the same moment of truth. The family was left divided, yes. But division no longer meant destruction. It meant separation where needed. Clarity where once there was confusion. Growth where there had been stagnation. And in the end, that was the real conclusion. Not a dramatic ending, not a final confrontation, not a perfect resolution. But movement, forward, honest, imperfect, the drama that once fueled headlines settled into wisdom. And for everyone watching, the takeaway was clear. Silence protects comfort, truth demands courage, and once courage shows up, nothing stays the same again. Now it's your turn. After hearing everything, after watching the twists, the silence, the confrontations, and the choices that changed everything, the biggest question is this. What would you have done? Would you have stayed quiet to protect the image, or spoken up knowing it could blow everything apart? Fans are still divided, emotions are still running high, and this story clearly doesn't have one simple answer. Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. Do you think Jasmine was right to finally reclaim her voice, or did she reopen wounds that should have stayed closed? Was Rasheeda's decision to choose peace over explanation the ultimate power move, or do you believe forgiveness should have looked different? And where does Kirk really stand in all of this? Accountability, growth, or too little too late? If this story had you glued from start to finish, make sure you hit that like button because it tells us you want more deep dives like this. If you're new here, don't just watch and disappear. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next breakdown, because trust us, the drama never really ends, it just evolves. And remember, this channel isn't just about headlines. It's about reading between the lines, questioning the narrative, and talking about what others are afraid to say out loud. So speak up, sound off, and let us know which side you're on, or if you think there are no sides at all. We'll see you in the comments. Eyes.